A man named David Fuller was shocked, but not too surprised when police knocked on his door on the morning of the 3rd of December 2020 during the COVID pandemic. They'd been searching for over 3 decades to put a face to this photo fit of a man responsible for the infamous unsolved bedsit murders that took place in Tunbridge Wells, England during the 1980s. Their search not only unearthed the killer, but led to another shocking discovery.
On the back of his chest of drawers, it looks like he's got some hard drives in there, I would say.
His deeply distressing crimes have been referred to as unprecedented in British legal history. The bedsit murders became one of the UK's longest unsolved double homicide cases, leaving the killer at large for an astonishing 33 years before he was captured. Hi there my friend, I'm Royston and welcome back to the channel. Who was this bedsit killer? And more importantly, who were the victims? Well, before we talk about the victims, I think it's important to put some context behind the man responsible for these crimes. David Fuller was born in the mid-1950s, and although we don't have full access to his background, we know he grew up in Portsmouth. As a schoolboy, he was often a problem to the law due to his activities of stealing bikes. He also had the habit of damaging and setting fires to properties. He left school to become an electrician and maintenance man while working in the Navy shipyards of Portsmouth. And during the 1970s, while still living in Portsmouth, he committed a string of offences referred to by the police as creeper burglaries. In fact, he was sentenced for 26 burglaries at that point. However, he never served any prison time, and those offences happened well before the existence of a DNA database. A creeper burglary is a crime committed by someone who breaks into and creeps around your home whether you're there or not, stealing things as quietly as they can, or in some cases their motivation is to look or stare at you. Dr. Richard Badcock, a consultant forensic psychiatrist who was used to assess Dr. Harold Shipman, believes the crimes committed by Fuller followed a distinctive pattern. He believes the creeper burglaries were an act of voyeurism, where someone like Fuller would become aroused by spying on women as they were dressing or undressing. This habit gradually escalated and changed David's behaviour to finally commit murder, where he'd only feel alive during the moment of madness. The 2 bedsit murders in Tunbridge were just under 100 miles from Portsmouth. At that time, David was living within the area as he moved to Tunbridge in 1982. In 1987, Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce were both in their 20s and working towards improving life for themselves. They didn't know each other as far as we know, but they had a few things in common. Both of them worked on Camden Road in Tunbridge at manageress level, but in different businesses. They lived in bedsits in Tunbridge and enjoyed spending time with their respective friends. But the most disturbing thing they had in common was being visited by David Fuller. Wendy was 25 and had moved into a bedsit after the failure of a marriage. She was an independent, hard-working person whose goal in life was a normal one: to set up a home, have children and provide an environment for the family to flourish. A failed marriage proved to be a severe blow to her plan. However, Wendy worked in a photography shop known as Super Snaps as a manageress, and on the 22nd of June 1987 she went to work in the morning as usual until finishing around 5 o'clock, before returning to her bedsit to do a few chores, after which she spent the rest of the evening with a boyfriend and his mother. Just after 11 p.m, her boyfriend dropped her home on his motorbike, and it was the last time he'd ever see her alive. The following day, having failed to show up for work colleagues became worried, prompting them to contact her mother, who in turn alerted Wendy's boyfriend. Ian, the boyfriend, rushed over to the property, entered the rear of the bedsit and couldn't believe what he saw, which terrified him. Wendy was naked. She was bludgeoned around the head with blood splatter all over the bed where she was laying. The poor woman had been strangled and violated. The house she lived on in Guildford Road was shared by 9 other bedsitters with very thin walls between them. Yet no one heard a thing, and there was no sign of forced entry. The 25-year-old was deceased, and a diary she owned as well as a keyring were missing. 5 months later, Caroline Pierce, a 20-year-old, who worked as a manageress at Buster Brown's, which was a popular restaurant in Tonbridge, would often meet up with friends after work. In November 1987, she spent a night on the town with some of them. That evening, when the night came to an end, she called a taxi. Once she returned to her bedsit, neighbours reportedly heard screaming coming from Caroline's doorstep, unaware that she'd been abducted. Unfortunately, her body was discovered 3 weeks later, on the 15th of December, dumped in an overgrown drainage ditch on farmland in Romney Marsh, some 40 miles away. Her body was found naked, apart from a pair of tights she was wearing. It was a tractor driver who spotted her due to the elevated position of his cab. The injuries inflicted on Caroline were almost identical to what had happened to Wendy. Part of her clothing plus a distinctive keyring were missing, meaning both women's possessions were probably trophies used by the killer to remember his deeds. It's interesting to note that David Fuller's grandparents lived within the area where Caroline was dumped. As a child, he spent holidays in that location, and as an adult, he became a birdwatcher, spending time enjoying his hobby on that particular marsh. On top of that, he was a member of a cycling club who often pedalled directly past the ditch where the 20-year-old's body was discovered. During the lead-up to both women's deaths, local people reported the activity of a prowler. Some women were convinced they were being spied on via their windows. Maybe it was Mr. Fuller. Detectives agreed these 2 murders were linked, concerned it could be the work of a serial killer, as Caroline was battered around the head, strangled and savagely violated in a similar way to Wendy, who only lived a mile away from Caroline's bedsit. And this second murder sparked one of the biggest police investigations ever conducted in Kent, which continued for some time. Inconveniently, back in the 1980s, the UK was experimenting with CCTV technology. It wasn't fully operational during their hunt, meaning there was no footage for authorities to utilise. They couldn't track mobile phones back then either, because they didn't exist. DNA analysis was still very young, as it took another 8 years before we had a national database of offender profiles. Fortunately, not all was lost, because detectives managed to store away some forensic evidence from the crime scenes. One of these items happened to be a bloody fingerprint, located on a shopping bag connected to Wendy. Also, they preserved a footprint on the cuff of a white blouse from Wendy's flat, alongside some DNA from her duvet. In addition to that, they managed to secure a sperm specimen from the tights Caroline was wearing. 12 years then passed until 1999. At this point, detectives working the case were able to obtain a full DNA profile of the offender for Wendy's murder, but they had no idea who it was. Their hope was shattered when the sample failed to match anyone on the National DNA Database, the world's first that had been set up here in the UK in '95. The authority were trying everything, including having the case featured twice on Crime Watch, to no avail. Over the years, the investigation was naturally scaled back, although it was never completely left cold. Years continued to pass, and by 2019, forensic experts had developed new techniques for collecting DNA from a damaged sperm sample, like the one identified on Caroline's tights. Additionally, they use another technique known as familial DNA, which enables scientists to determine whether or not someone is related to an individual whose DNA is left at a crime scene. This new method can identify a killer through a family member. At the time, there were 6.5 million profiles on the National DNA Database. Familial DNA helps investigators to reduce that number significantly, to the point where it became manageable. A list of 90 potential relatives on the DNA database were uncovered. Next, They looked at the reduced list to find out who among them lived in the area where the murders took place, specifically checking if the offender would have been within the right age. And they found something. After visiting each of the 90 potential family members, they were able to obtain voluntary DNA samples from them. These samples were compared with those found at the crime scene some 32 years earlier, and the closest partial match they discovered came from a sibling of David Fuller, which was a massive breakthrough. This led to David receiving a knock on his door in early December 2020, where he was subsequently arrested.
Morning. David, please. Hello. We need to come and speak to you. Are you alright? David, if you listen to what I'm going to say. Yes. We're from Kent Police and we're investigating the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce in 1987. Okay? As part of that investigation, you've been linked as a suspect, both geographically and forensically. Okay, if you listen to what my colleagues are going to say to you.
Right, David, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce in 1987. Do you understand? You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later learn in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. You are being arrested to secure and preserve evidence by means of questioning, so we can conduct searches, so forensic samples can be obtained, and to prevent your disappearance. Do you understand?
When arrested, police found a post-it note in his pocket containing the numbers 1987. They suspected it was a PIN number to his bank card, suggesting every time it was used he was reminded of the 1987 murders. However, their work wasn't done yet. Initially, he lied about everything, telling the police that he wasn't their man.
David, did you murder Wendy Nell?
No.
Did you murder Caroline Pierce?
David explained he didn't even know where the girls had lived, as he was unfamiliar with the area. He also said he had no knowledge of Buster Brown's restaurant where Caroline worked, or of Super Snaps who employed Wendy. Yet it was established that David once lived on Guildford Road, the same road where Caroline was murdered. Plus, he often made visits to a friend in Grosvenor Park, the same location of Caroline's bedsit, indicating he deliberately lied about his familiarity with the area, including Buster Brown's restaurant as well as the photo shop. How do we know this? Well, police found evidence hidden in receipts and notes discovered in his home.
We also found that items from Super Snaps where Wendy worked. It is clear to me that he knew Wendy Nell, or who she was. He knew Caroline. He has targeted them to death.
It just so happened that Super Snaps where Wendy worked was a shop he used on a regular basis to get his own personal photographs developed. During the original investigation, work was carried out on the shoe print found on a blouse in Wendy's bedsit. That print most likely matched a Clark Sports trainer, according to the professionals working on it. After David's arrest, police found numerous photographs in his home, probably from the 1980s, showing him wearing the same style of trainer we just saw. And his fingerprint partially matched the print found on the shopping bag in Wendy's bedsit. It was the overwhelming DNA evidence that cracked the case. Traces of it were also found on Wendy's duvet, making Mr. Fuller an astonishing 1 billion times more likely to be the killer. And this was proven when a DNA sample taken from David confirmed the DNA result. Plus it matched the semen collected from the tights Caroline was wearing. At last, the elusive monster had been identified, 3 decades after the gruesome killings. But we're still not finished yet, as police uncovered something else discovered in his home, something both macabre and chilling. He'd already destroyed 2 families, and this new detail had a numbing effect on many more families. After being arrested, his home was searched meticulously. They soon came across a vile hoard of hard drives which supported images and videos, alongside floppy disk and printed pictures, making up a complex filing system that David had been hiding from the world. We'll shortly find out what those hidden hard drives contained, but be warned as it absolutely astounded the nation. This horrible man worked in electrical maintenance at the Kent and Sussex Hospital full-time from 1989, and then Tunbridge Wells Hospital, where he was moved to in 2010. As an electrician, he was given a swipe card allowing him access throughout any part of the premises. He worked the 11 AM to 7 PM shift, and once mortuary staff had finished for the day, he'd enter that part of the hospital where he wasn't actually needed. His motive for being there was to alarmingly satisfy some kind of a wicked compulsion. He'd record personal details of the dead from mortuary logs and identification bracelets. He would even video record himself doing the unthinkable to those dead bodies. The images and videos are dated from the periods when he worked at both hospitals. He didn't seem to mind what age his victims were. His depraved images and videos were then uploaded and stored onto his secret hard drives and hidden away in his home. Enough evidence was collected to show him performing necrophilia with 100 bodies, of which 78 have been identified. Among that number were 3 children, with one of them as young as 9, the oldest victim being 100.
On the back of his chest of drawers, it looks like he's got some hard drives in there, I would say.
Part of me is trying to understand what must be going through his head. I can only conclude that there's an element of control going on. That's all I can imagine. On opening the hard drives, I'm looking at a mortuary, and I'm looking at a man sexually abusing what are clearly dead people.
Only a month before his arrest, he'd been in the mortuary to violate a 24-year-old woman named Azra Kamal, seen here, who tragically died while running from her burning car on the A21 in Tunbridge. Her mother was informed with the dreadful news that David had sexually penetrated Azra on 3 separate occasions while she lay in the morgue. The first assault happened before the mother could even view her child. Kamal, the mother, said, "She didn't look at peace, and now I know why." She went on to explain that all hell broke loose. "I can't describe the rage I felt." On a personal level, when I think about the pain, Kamal experienced and all of the other families connected to this, I can only imagine anger, despair, and questions as to how this could have happened. It's so difficult to comprehend what surviving relatives are actually going through. However, in a police interview, this insignificant man made an admission of using Facebook to search for the people he abused in the mortuary. The unimaginable suffering he inflicted on so many families no doubt continues to this day. Mr. Fuller only admitted his guilt when confronted with overwhelming evidence. In 2007, Wendy's father Bill told the BBC, "One day someone's going to ring that door and say we've caught him, and there will be a celebration. By God, there will be. Especially if he goes down for a very, very long time." 13 years after those words were expressed, the day eventually arrived, as we saw. But sadly, Bill Nell, who died in 2017, didn't live to see it. Fortunately, his wife Pam did, who attended the trial, where the monster initially denied murder, but ultimately pled guilty in 2021. She can be seen during the statements being made, and if you look close enough, you can detect a little smile from her face, knowing that a vicious killer was given a whole life sentence in December 2021 without the possibility of parole, and he'll eventually die behind bars.